story we've been told that getting a good degree will buy you a ticket to a brighter future is potentially an uncomfortable lie told about higher education here in the UK. I'm going to share with you 5 reasons why this might be the case, and you might come to agree with me. And then I'm going to offer you 2 ways in which we can think outside the box about the value of undergraduate study. So, reason 1. We don't have a graduate job market of the kind that can sustain the numbers of undergraduates and graduates that we have and their aspirations. UK Guild HE, an organisation that represents about 50% of about 50 UK HE providers, says that about half the people who've got a degree end up in jobs that don't require one. The OECD, which is an arm of the World Bank, says the UK has more overqualified workers than any other economy outside of Japan. And our own Office for National Statistics says that 31% of us are overeducated for our employment. That's a pretty depressing phrase, I'm sure you'll agree. And if you graduated after 2007, that rises to 34%. We also tell a somewhat inaccurate tale about the benefits of studying STEM subjects rather than arts and humanities here. But the ONS finds the overeducated working across industry sectors and having graduated from a range of subjects from biosciences to technology to engineering to maths to English to law to classics and languages. Reason 2. Merit and talent don't always buy you success here in Britain. We live in the second most unequal society in the world. The respected think tank, the IFS, and prominent Professor Angus Deaton really recently confirmed as much for us. The Social Mobility Commission finds that there is an 11.5% pay gap between students who, when they were at school, didn't qualify for free school meals and those who did. For the most disadvantaged in our society, that rises to an uncomfortable 19%. And we haven't even started talking about race and ethnicity here. This has been a big focus for the NUS and Universities UK of late, and for very good reason. There is an embarrassing 13.5% awarding gap between white, black, Asian and minority ethnic students. And black male graduates, even when we control for other factors, earn often up to 17% less than their white male counterparts. Now, I'm glad to say that universities are starting to do something about this, but it's going to take a while for such entrenched discrimination to be eradicated. So that story of being a graduate, getting you high earnings, turns out to be sort of true, but it depends a little bit on who you are. We might have turned 50% of school leavers into undergraduates inside 2 decades, but we haven't at the same time necessarily done very much at all to tackle the persistent and pernicious inequality that shapes our educational provision. Nor have we done very much to create that graduate job market. Reason 3. The skills and aptitudes you might need for 21st century employment are pretty hard to define. And, it turns out, might not be a product of degree-level study after all. UK employers find that about 37% of UK employers think that graduates make no particular contribution to our society. And we hear all the time about business organisations complaining that there's not enough skill sets in our graduates to serve the worlds of industry and make them turn. We live in the most astonishing, technically advanced age. And who knows amongst which of us is going to find that their job becomes fully automated at some point in the next few years. but what we can be certain of is the continued advancement of technology at a tremendous pace that may keep making our degree studies somewhat irrelevant. Another inevitability is the need for us to commodify ourselves, to market ourselves and to show the world what we're capable of in a very competitive environment. We talk about undergraduates needing to have soft skills, deep skills, social skills, to be great at critical thinking, to be team players, to be collaborative, to be cooperative, to be creative, to be critical thinkers who can analyse. We talk about these things. We ask them also to be flexible and adaptable, willing to change and to have a whole plethora of skills. But we can't necessarily assign these things to degree study alone. It turns out that your possession of some of these things and the complex psychological and sociological interplay that would lead you to have the advantage over others may have a lot more to do with who you were before you went to university. In academic terms, we call this the possession of social and cultural capital. Okay. Reason 4. In turning our degrees into commodities that can be bought and sold, we immediately reduce their value. We have seen a wholesale shift in the way that we fund universities inside the last 30 years or so. Tony Blair espoused a mantra of education, education, education. And like the Thatcherite Ken Baker before them, David Blunkett and David Willits vowed to see 50% of school leavers go to university. At the same time, we brought about significant changes in our polytechnic education, which many of us would argue has narrowed our technical and applied options. So for each generation of school leavers, it can look very much like university or bust. No wonder that some of them, in their moments of crisis in the university that I work in, sometimes say to me that they're not really sure why they're doing this, but that they didn't necessarily feel like they had as much choice. And reason 5, we may have forgotten a little bit about what the real nature of learning in higher education can do for us, what it can be for us and what it can do to us, both collectively and individually. Learning in higher education is problematic. It's troublesome in that it troubles your previous held beliefs and values and ways of being and doing things. That's a good thing. But if you go to university purely for extrinsic motivation, I want to earn more money, and then come to find out that by the process of going through that education, you have changed your internal workings and you're now seeing the world in a very different way, what does that mean for your original focus? Better to do, as Cardinal John Henry Newman said, who was once of this parish and an eminent thinker on the role of universities, writing in the middle of the Victorian era. He said that actually what study does for us is give us habits of mind that contribute to civic society and aid the public good. And he warned against, even all the way back then, measuring degree study in instrumental and economic terms only. So, we've had a good look at these 5 reasons as to why we need to think outside the box. What we've seen is that there's a problem with the pipeline from undergraduate study to graduate high earnings. We can see that these reasons are at the heart of what is wrong if we commodify degree level study. So, what's the alternative? How can we think beyond the box? How can we repurpose our studies for undergraduates? How can we give them hope in this competitive world? In the university I work at, very near here, I see the same story emerge time and time again. Students arrive full of hope and ambition for their own social mobility, and they are driven to work hard, and I admire them in that and I respect them in that. But I sometimes wonder if I'm propping up the myth and if I'm part of that uncomfortable lie that I've shared with you here. And then I remember that my job is to keep the faith. My job is to be hopeful for them until they can take on the mantle of that hope themselves. My job is to remember what the value of study is in our society in a richer and wider context. John Brennan, an academic at London School of Economics, says that graduates contribute to society in myriad ways well beyond economic measure. He has found in his research that graduates are more likely to vote, to volunteer, to participate in public debate. Graduates aid social cohesion, and they also aid a drop in the crime rates. They help develop political stability in our societies. They look after themselves better. They have longer life expectancy. They enjoy life a little more. And they cope better with stress and distress. I'm guessing that each of you would think that we probably need a little bit more of that in our society right now. Graduates from Isaac Newton in the 1600s to Malala Yousafzai, who will graduate from Oxford next summer, have made contributions to society in myriad ways that cannot be measured on the open market. From developing vaccines that save thousands of lives every day, to unravelling DNA code, to developing machines that chew up plastic in the ocean, or allow disabled people to walk and talk again, to explorations of the past through archaeology, historical documents, literature, music and art that gives us a better understanding of the present, and back to my focus of social inequality, where our social scientists are focusing hard trying to unravel that and scrutinise it. Graduates and undergraduates have the possibility of contributing to society in so many ways. In order for our students to do that, to have hope and to see their role in a richer, wider landscape, they need our universities to be places of hope too. Wilhelm Humboldt is a Prussian polymath who was active at the turn of the 19th century and is generally considered to be the father of the modern idea of the university. For him, learning in a university remains perpetually unfinished. That is, teachers and students come together, seeking answers to the problems of the day. For him, ignorance was the greatest threat, and in fact, he said that the most dangerous worldviews are the worldviews of those who have never viewed the world. In a university, we can truly view the world. In a university, we can put the world under a microscope and seek answers, seek solutions. Universities are not museums. They don't simply archive the achievements of the past. They are also the incubators of the future. They are about not just knowledge replication, but knowledge creation. So I've talked about hope and the necessity of that for our students, and equally of the need for hope on behalf of our universities, to free them from the consumerist rhetoric and from the marketised culture, and to allow them to make their contribution not as businesses, but as houses that look after civic society for us and aid all human progress. Students and universities need to come together in true partnership in order for that to be realised in our time. This is Paulo Freire. He was a radical and brilliant Brazilian educationalist. And he spoke often of hope. And he said that if you think you're going to see the revolution come to pass, the revolution of habit and thought that means we can look for the answers that I speak of here today, he argues that we might just have misunderstood the task. He calls on every single one of us to make the road by walking, to join in the debate and the science and the discussion. We might do that and never see the revolution come to pass in our own lifetime. but he calls on all of us to join in with it. And Angela Davis, who is an American academic, once an activist and part of the Black Panther movement, tells us that we have to remain hopeful of the possibility of radical transformation and believe in it as a daily act. If we can do this, and if our universities, our undergraduates, and our graduates can do this, and if we can help them in that regard, then maybe we might just try to find some of those solutions we've been seeking. Thank you.